Memorizing the exact timeline of a stranger's wedding isn't ordinary. But for Isla, it was just another Tuesday. She didn't glance at her clipboard once as she recited the entire schedule from memory. A few feet away, Zane knelt by the wooden arbor, tightening a bolt that didn't need tightening. Without looking up, he smiled and said, "You'd make a great bride, Isla. You know this wedding better than the people actually getting married." Isla didn't look up either. "I'd need a groom for that," she replied softly. The wrench in Zane's hand went still. He looked at her, wanting to say something, but stayed quiet. Neither of them knew that by the end of this wedding season, the meaning of that unscripted answer would completely change for both of them. Cameron Orchard Estates was more than just land, it was a family legacy. It belonged to Isla's grandfather before she was even born. When the fruit alone stopped covering the rising costs of the land, her father transformed it into a premium wedding venue. Isla grew up walking between these trees long before she learned to read a balance sheet. Now, a year after her father's passing, she was running the entire place alone. Early mornings, late nights, and a phone that never stopped ringing. Zane had been hired 3 months ago to rebuild the ceremony stage and the main arbor. Isla's assistant had lined up a dozen local contractors, but Isla chose Zane. His estimates were honest, his work was flawless, and unlike the previous carpenters, he didn't pad his invoices. He kept to himself, worked until the sunlight faded, and drove back into town where his 8-year-old son, Kabir, was waiting for him. One evening, the company's longtime accountant, Parveen, met Isla by the gate. Clutching a financial folder, she said, "The annual board meeting is next Thursday, Isla. It's been 12 months since your father passed. The board wants to take control." Her father's will had given Isla 1 year of sole authority, 1 year to run the estate exactly as she saw fit. After that, every major decision would go to a vote of 7 board members, none of whom had ever run a business through a single wedding season. The next morning, Zane brought his son, Kabir, to the orchard for the first time. The boy set his tiny toolbox down carefully and looked up at Isla. "Are you the lady who owns all these trees?" he asked. Isla smiled, crouching down. "I am. There are about 5,000 of them." Kabir reached into his pocket and handed her a tangled piece of ribbon he found in the grass, leftover trim from last week's wedding. "You dropped this. I think it belongs to a bride." Watching from a ladder, something in Zane's chest loosened. He had been raising Kabir alone ever since his wife passed away years ago, and seeing Isla treat his son with such warmth touched a chord he hadn't felt in a long time. The peace didn't last long. Daniel arrived an hour later. He was Isla's distant cousin and an influential board member. He always wore expensive suits that looked out of place among the sawdust and ladders. Without a greeting, Daniel adjusted his glasses and said, "Maintenance costs on the west parcel are up 12%. I'm bringing the full numbers to Thursday's vote." His smile never reached his eyes. He wanted to sell the land, claiming it was a financial liability. Zane watched the exchange silently. As a builder, he knew when a joint wasn't sitting square. Daniel's intentions felt exactly like a structurally flawed piece of wood, dangerous and bound to collapse. Later that week, a high-profile branding consultant visited the orchard. When she walked up to the main stage, she stopped dead in her tracks, running her fingers over a seamless wooden joint built without a single visible nail. "Who built this?" she gasped. Zane stepped out, holding a level. "I did." The consultant stared at him in shock. "You are Zane Kirby, the man who designed the famous floating stages in New York? The entire industry thought you retired rich and went off the grid." Isla was stunned. The man she had hired as a local carpenter was a legendary designer in the wedding industry. That night, after the crew left, they sat in the quiet equipment shed, sharing coffee surrounded by the scent of pine and sawdust. "Why didn't you tell me?" Isla asked. Zane turned his cup slowly. "I left that life 5 years ago, the same month my wife died. Traveling 40 weeks a year didn't work as a single father. I didn't see the point in bringing up a version of myself that doesn't exist anymore. I just want to be a father to Kabir." Isla looked at him, truly seeing him for the first time. "I understand," she said softly. "I was engaged once. Right here, 6 years ago. 3 weeks before the wedding, I found out he was lying about everything. I buried myself in this orchard just to run away from the ghost of that wedding. For the first time all season, a genuine, unguarded smile passed between them. They were two broken souls helping each other rebuild from the wreckage of their pasts, but Denial tried to play dirty. At the next preliminary meeting, he tried to use Isla and Zane's growing closeness against her, questioning her professional judgment to the board members. But what Denial didn't know was that Parveen, the loyal accountant, had spent the weekend digging through old vendor records. She discovered a recurring, consulting fee, paid to a shell company called North Shore Advisory. The registered owner of that shell company? Denial himself. Denial had signed a secret brokerage agreement with a massive resort competitor 14 months ago, while Isla's father was still alive and fighting his illness. The agreement guaranteed Denial a multi-million-dollar commission if the West parcel was sold. He wasn't trying to save the orchard, he was trying to liquidate it for his own greed. On the day of the final vote, Isla stood at the head of the boardroom table. Zane sat quietly at the back of the room at her request. Denial tried to deflect, shouting, "This is a setup. She is compromising the company for her personal relationship with a contractor." Isla remained completely calm. She opened the folder and passed out copies of the bank trails and signatures. "This isn't about my contractor, Denial. This is about your signature on a betrayal that started while my father was still sitting in this very chair." The room went dead silent. The evidence was irrefutable. The board immediately voted to oust Denial and permanently rejected the sale of the land. With the threat gone, a profound peace settled over Cameron Orchard Estates. The autumn wind moved through the cherry trees, indifferent to corporate greed and past heartbreaks. That evening, Zane walked up to Isla by the completed ceremony stage. "Well, you have a secure venue, perfect financial sheets, and you still have the entire wedding protocol memorized," he joked. Isla turned to look at him, her eyes bright and free of the weight she had carried for a year. She smiled and took his hand. "True. But for the first time, I think I've finally found the right groom." They stood together under the canopy of trees, no longer running from their pasts, but building a brand new future, side by side.